now my pleasure to introduce you to one of our two nonfiction mentors for the year, Mark Anthony Rolo. I think Mark Anthony is actually a good blend of Toni and Welcome. He's both brings heart and humor to the Mentor Series. So Mark Anthony Rolo is an enrolled member of the Bad River Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. He teaches at the White Earth Tribal and Community College. His memoir, My Mother's Now Earth, was nominated for a 2012 Minnesota Book Award. He is also the author of the novel The Wonder Bowl and an anthology of plays, What's an Indian Woman to Do, and other plays. He has worked as a journalist in Washington, D.C., Minneapolis, and Los Angeles. His plays have been performed in the Twin Cities, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and L.A. So please welcome Mark Anthony Rolo.
Gosh, I don't know. I think I should have went first. This is kind of depressing. No. I'm so glad they love your story because she sent it to me, Toni, last November or something. And I was my dog and I, you've seen him around, we were in a motel at the time, and I was laughing nonstop reading your story. So it's nice to know that I'm not the only one. Right? And thank you for reading tonight. Welcome. I really appreciate your willingness to just embrace it all and to be honest and to put your heart out there. I was telling her, and this is not related to you, Toni, and your style of writing, but one thing I've noticed about the creative nonfiction folks is in writing about their lives, they seem to have such courage and such willingness to, as I say, lay it out there. And for years, I've had issues with Minnesota fiction writers for lack of being that way, you know, of laying it all out there in this sense of self-consciousness, and now I'm turning into a critic, and I'm not up here to do that. But, hey, I want to say something. Anne Regan is here. Anne, where are you?
We're here.
There you are. Anne's my editor, and she's for Alice Press. And yeah, because the book's kind of dreamy and lyrical, and, you know, it's just, and I sent some early drafts to Anne, and if she had not gotten excited about it, I would have quit. If she said, nah, it isn't quite working. So Anne, I'm so excited to say in front of everyone that I just appreciate you liking my story and working with me. And if you ever have the pleasure of working with Anne Regan, not Reagan, boy, don't ever say that, you will, she's a terrific editor. For those who you might not know, this little book is it's about the last 3 years of my mother's life in northern Minnesota, and we grew up poor and all that kind of stuff. But my mother had a very, very hard time struggling with depression and 11 kids and an alcoholic father. So this little scene, it's a true story. I missed the early 1970s. This happened between 1971 and 73. And I always wanted to be a hippie, but I was only like 10 years old. So by the time I got old enough, it was disco. Yeah. So, but here's a true story. One morning I was going with my mother and father into town to do the laundry. And I was always the first kid up, so I got to go with him, and we found this dead hippie on the highway. So let me find my spot. It's called Dead Hippie Praying. And we were moving into a farmhouse at the time. We'd been living in the garage, so this is in the spring of the year. Once we moved into the farmhouse, maybe a few weeks, my father says some things will stay the same. My mother will never have enough water to wash all the clothes. The well's only 20 feet deep, he says, leaning against the new double sink in the kitchen. We're going to have to keep hauling water from town for a long time to come. My mother steps around Scott and me as we sit on the floor, scraping away old linoleum. I notice her snakes, the burn scars wrapped around her legs. That water barrel's almost empty, she says. I've scrubbed just about every damn floor in this house. Don't bother refilling it. I'm too worn out to be washing and hanging clothes today. She goes into the living room to her mop and bucket. The sun is still shining through the brand new picture window. The sun has stared through that window since this morning when we started ripping up the old kitchen floor. My mother wrings her mop one more time, then wipes dripping sweat from her face. I need to get supper going, she says. We'll go to the laundromat in the morning, my father says as she leaves the back door. Scott and I pretend to keep scraping, waiting until our father goes down to the basement to check on the sump pump. When he's gone, we race upstairs to find Dennis and Joseph. They already moved into one of the bedrooms a few days ago. We haven't seen the inside of their room yet, but Scott is pretty sure he knows where Joseph hides his comic books, in the bottom drawer. They found the dresser and an RCA Hi-Fi record player at the dump. We see their muddy rubber boots and garden gloves in the hallway outside their room. The door's open, but we don't hear their music playing. It's fried, Dennis says as he pulls out the hi-fi speaker wires. Joseph is stretched out on the bed with a comic book. It was working fine last night, he says, and then he looks at Scott and me. Have you guys been messing around in here? No, it's the wiring, Dennis says. You know, people throw away shit for a reason. He kicks the hi-fi. It crashes against the wall. Hey, Joseph says, reaching for an album cover on top of one of the speakers. I hope you took that Morrison LP. Who cares? The album's a piece of shit, too, Dennis says. He kicks it again, making sure the record player cracks in 100 pieces. Yeah, but it's Dale Olsen's shitty album, not ours, Joseph says as we watch pieces of the record twirl on the floor. I'll buy him a new one when I get paid for my job this summer. Why is it a piece of shit, I ask. He just talks, doesn't sing, thinks he's a poet, I guess. He's got one song, if you can call it that, where he talks about seeing some dead Indians on a highway. That's supposed to be profound? I shrug my shoulders and stare at the white walls covered with magic marker. Joseph has started drawing life-size comic book heroes on the walls. Spider-Man, Captain America, and Scarlet Witch. Joseph looks at Scott and me. Hey, you guys, I'll let you read the new Avengers comic if you go get the radio in the garage. You get it, I say. I've been pulling weeds all day. Come on. What do you think we've been doing? Joseph holds up his new Avengers comic. The Wasp's boobs are bigger, he says with a grin. Dennis laughs, reaching for the comic. Hey, ever wonder why the Vision's skin is red? It's not skin, Scott says. He's an android. Yeah, an Indian android, Dennis says. It makes complete sense. You know how he always feels inferior around the white superheroes, wishes he was human. Well, that's the way white people make Indians feel. Makes them think being human is the same as being white. I don't know what he's whining about, Joseph says, taking his comic book. He could have a Scarlet Witch any day, or the Wasp for that matter. I sit on the edge of the bed and lean over, hoping to get a look at the Wasp's new boobs. You think that's why Mom married the old man, I say to Dennis? She wanted to be white? Dennis laughs again, then grabs one of the broken wood pieces of the hi-fi record player. He turns over a dented metal garbage can and sits on the chair next to it with a piece of broken wood in his hand. He bangs away, looking at the Scarlet Witch, drawing on the wall. Then he sings to her in a powwow voice. Hey-ya, 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 I say. I'll get down with you. Hey-ya, 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 I say. They don't have powwows in Big Falls. We're the only Indians living here. Back in Milwaukee, my mother used to go to powwows in one of the parks with her sisters. Dennis says he heard from friends in high school that they got powwows at Red Lake and Net Lake during the summer. But my mother doesn't say anything, and Dennis changes the subject. My mother fries hamburgers, and Whiskey sits by the stove looking up at her, sniffing at the smell. Philly stands next to her, opening cans of kidney beans and tomato paste. My sister asks when the rest of us can move into the farmhouse. My mother only glances back at my father, who is watching the Canadian news on the television. The only time he watches the news is when he's not drinking. The rest of us sort through dirty clothes, shoving them in pillowcases and laundry baskets. We make Michael pick up the clothes that are still wet from his peeing in bed at night. During supper, my mother is always the last to eat, but tonight she's eating slower than usual. After we clear our plates, Philly tells her that she shouldn't have to do dishes because she helped cook. My mother looks at me. I glare at my sister. Philly hasn't done dishes in a week, I say. Anybody can open a stupid can of kidney beans. But my mother just sits at the table looking at me. Finally, she dips a piece of bread in her bowl. Want me to get the broom, Mom? Billy says. Shut up, I say. But my mother still says nothing. When she finishes eating, she gets up and takes her bowl to the sink. She turns on the faucet, then scoops out some oxidol from the box and pours it in the dishwasher, or the dishwater. Not a dishwasher, I'll tell you. No way. She tells Philly and John to start hauling the laundry out to the Oldsmobile. She leans against the sink and rubs the back of her neck. She stands for a few more long seconds, then reaches for some dirty dishes. I see the tear in the side of her dress is bigger. I look down and stare at her snake scars around her calves and ankles, and then I reach for the towel. I stand next to my mother, waiting for her to dip dishes in the rinse water. My mother says nothing, and neither do I. We just stand there together, her arms sometimes touching the side of my face. I am the first one up in the next morning. My mother is sitting at the kitchen table, rocking Robert in her arms. My father finishes the last of his coffee, then slides a pile of quarters off the table and into a brown bag. He says if I want to go with him and help my mother out with the laundry, I should find my shoes. My mother takes Robert in the bedroom and lays him next to Philly. She puts on her sweater, and I follow her out the front door. Even though it's early June, the grass sparkles with frost under the blue sky sun. The chickens wander around the yard, picking at the white blades of grass. I put my chin under my T-shirt and blow steamy breath on my chest, and then I squeeze up against the laundry in the back of my father's Oldsmobile. My father turns on the heater, and I lick the frost from the window. The frost is thicker in the shadows of the woods as we drive along the dirt road. It looks almost like an inch of new snow on the pine branches. My father tells my mother that he's glad he didn't start planting the garden yet. It'll probably freeze tonight as well, he says. When we reach the highway, the Oldsmobile comes to a complete stop. My father points at something on the pavement. What the hell is that? I roll the window down all the way and wait for my cloudy breath to drift away. And then I see him, a white hippie with long black hair stretched out on his back in the middle of Highway 71. He has his hands folded together on his chest. He's wearing a buckskin jacket and white jeans that are tucked inside leather boots. You think he's dead, my father says? You better go see before one of those big logging trucks runs him over, my mother says. My father puts the Oldsmobile in park and reaches for his door handle. Maybe he's on a vision quest, he says, smiling. My mother covers her mouth and laughs a little, then twists the rear view mirror. She starts fixing the bobby pins in her hair. I lean out the window. My father slowly walks to the hippie, then around him. Finally, my father kicks at the hippie's boots. The hippie slowly sits up with a grin on his face. I can't hear what they're saying to each other, but my father points toward Big Falls. The hippie shakes his head and looks in the other direction. I ask my mom what a vision quest is, even though I know she's not going to tell me much about it. It's an old Indian ceremony, something you're supposed to do in the woods, not in the middle of a highway. My father puts out his hand to help the hippie get up, but the hippie shakes his head no. He gets up on his own and smiles at my dad, then staggers down the highway toward Bemidji. I guess he got tired of hitchhiking and figured someone was bound to pick him up if he laid in the middle of the road, my father says as he shifts his Oldsmobile. We turn on the highway, and I look at that hippie one more time. Just when we hit Big Falls city limits, we spot a black 1950s car loaded with Indians coming out of nowhere. My father eases up on the gas pedal and gives them as much of the road as he can. He stops the Oldsmobile on the side of the highway. My mother turns her face to the window. I know she doesn't want the Indians to spot her. She's afraid they'll pull over and ask to come by the farm for fried potatoes, scrambled eggs, and bread, and then crack open their beer cans and tell laughing stories about each other and the other Chippewas who live in these parts. And then they'll have to spend the night and another night. Dennis once told my mother quit drinking long before I was born, that she didn't care for the taste of it. She doesn't mind it when her sisters drink, but that's because they always go home when they're alone. But the Indians do not stop. I can't tell how many are in the car as they whiz by, but I can see a man and woman in the front seat laughing and singing. My father glances one more time in his side mirror and smiles. Look how fast they're moving, he says. I hope that hippie didn't go back to sleep. Thank you.